CFR Network, CFR News. Good day, good night, all. Shalom, balance, paradise, niha, namaste. All of the universal greetings. Returning fabulous guest, the one and only Monica Perez. How are we doing, mademoiselle?
Very well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here. It always cheers me to hang out with you, Noble, for sure.
Likewise, likewise. Before we get into the main topic, how have you been? What's been going on? What is new?
Well, if you really want to know, there's a lot to catch up on. So my big show is the Drive Time News Blast. I do a daily news show from the perspective of truth, liberty, and justice. Your listeners have probably heard me plug that in the past.
Mhm.
But a few things happened recently all at once that I just got overwhelmed. I have three teenagers. One is handicapped, and my mom's 93. And
Mm.
as the summer's approaching, I just realized that our situation's changing a lot. And there's absolutely no way. It wasn't like a hard decision in that, like, oh, should I do this? I just cannot do a full-time show in real time every day anymore. So it was a very painful decision and difficult because I've been doing it for 3 years. I spent all day, every day, basically trying to, build a community really more than anything else. And I think we've been pretty successful with that. I do a lot of meetups. I try to connect people. And maybe that was, maybe I just accomplished the mission. I really don't know, but I have to make some changes. So I'm going to just do like a 10-minute show every morning, that I don't have to do it. I'll try to do it every day, but I could do some in advance and I can
Yeah.
do it just locally. I don't have to do it on the internet if it's just me. And hopefully I'll stay in touch with people until my life eases up again. But I felt like I just started thinking about this world and it's scary. And what more can I do? What more can I do? And then I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, like the wise people keep telling me, you're probably like looking out too much and you probably need to,
Look
you can't
within.
control any of that, but
Yeah.
you can control your own scene. You better not drop that ball. So I feel like this is the last minute where if I do what I have to do, I won't have dropped the ball. But after this, I think I'd have to answer for getting my priorities wrong.
Well, it's all about balance. It's all about balance. And as you said, you spent 3 long, diligent years putting in a lot of work, laying the foundation and, building, as you say, that community and stuff. So, sometimes you have to let that baby go of sorts and,
Yes.
let it do what it does kind of thing.
Yep.
And as you say, concentrate on the most important thing, which is familiar. So,
And I feel like I've built so many relationships with like listeners, with other podcasters, even with people who have farms and stuff. Like
mhm.
I feel like I've built up a lot of credit. Like there's a lot of runway. Sometimes you get to spend a little bit of that credit. And I know people will still be there for me. And I'm going to try to take some of this flexibility and visit some of those farms and homesteaders. And,
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, who knows what's next and for how long this little interim will last. I'm going to try to make the most of it.
Definitely, but you most definitely should. I mean, as you say, taking it out of the realms of the cyber world and being able to actually physically meet up with people, that is a wonderful thing in itself, to build up trust and a relationship where you can say, you know what, you're more than someone who's just behind a username and a keyboard. You're someone I would actually like to hang out with kind of thing and meet up.
Yes, and I've been going through this and you've seen it happen and the
Mm,
times that we've talked to each other like a more I'm not going to say it's spiritual. I'm not super spiritual. It is actually a problem for me because I'm just hyper intellectual. But I had to in this experience which has like really gripped me with anxiety to kind of make this transition. I had to keep saying like let go and let God, which is like an AA thing, or just have some faith, and
mhm.
just say have faith in the people who you want to maintain relationships with, and just, have faith in your convictions, your ability to do the right thing to get your, because I used to ask people like, and my husband's smart, like I'd ask him like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And then I started to learn that you can answer these questions yourself. You
Yeah.
just have to really reflect on them and then have some courage
Hmm.
behind your decisions and a little bit of faith. You have to kind of let go. So we'll see.
Yes. And the most trickiest thing, and I find it a struggle every day, is going with your first thought. That first
Really?
thought, and it's generally that first thought,
Hmm.
should I do this? And as soon as that second option comes into your head, you should automatically just disavow it. Let's go with what I originally thought, what I originally planned. Let's forget the
Hmm.
distractions and just go with that. I'm finding that challenging at the moment.
Well, I had a spiritual advisor tell me that. So I would think like the anxiety and all that is just, is it my conscience bothering, whatever? He's like, no, that's the devil. That's the devil is going in there with with your doubts, a self doubt. And I was like, wow, I had to really get my mind around that one. And I'm still thinking about it. But we think that those little voices are, our conscience, but sometimes they're really something more, it's
Ye-
actually bad for you.
Yes, indeed. That doubt and that buildup of self-doubt is, as you've verbalized, it is of a demonic spirit. It unfortunately is. Now, don't get it twisted. There is a difference between having a little bit of doubt. Oh, should I make this transaction? Should I go to this place? That is just a logical sort of debating on, is this good for me? Is it not good for me? Am I going to get a good experience from it? It's weighing up, it's judging the situation. Whereas, as you say, when that cloud of, oh my God, I'm not good enough. I'm not gonna. I'm gonna fail. That's the spirit of the devil
Yeah, you
creeping in.
think so? Because that is, I mean, one is discernment. I get that.
Mhm.
But that has a different quality than this irrational, just like fear. I almost feel like it's just these dumb fears that have no value. They don't actually get you closer to an answer. They don't get you closer to your conscience or good. It's just a lot of energy wasted. And I really feel like like the powers that be have put so much time and effort over the years and really understanding like the fear and pathological psychology, like
Mhm.
the mental problems. And then you see them manifesting in the crazy trends right now, from Twitter stuff to like the way they get into kids' minds
Mm.
and the way they can get people to get behind any political movement just for fear of being outside the
Aside,
mainstream.
yeah.
And I think that they exploit and exacerbate those fears and anxieties to the point where people actually can't exercise actual discernment and judgment and wisdom. And that's I think that could be the biggest tool they have in their
Yeah.
toolbox.
And I think that's 40% of the popular, and I'm being very generous. I think the other 60%, there's no more in discernment. It's a case of, this is the place, this is the square box I need to be in, because this is the biggest square box which has the dominant sort of force out here. So whatever they say, however they dress, whatever titleage they want to use, I am going to get down with that program, because I don't want to be in these little small boxes on the outside. I want to be in with the in crowd.
I remember I had a friend, an acquaintance, when I moved, I don't know where it was, Texas, I think. She said to me, I was like, I just didn't know what to think about something. I was really confused. And she said, well, I just try to see what everybody else is doing and do that. And I was like, wow, that never even occurred to me. Like, that's just crazy. And then I started to understand fashion. I was like, oh, you guys are looking at each other and
Mm.
trying to like copy that. And if someone's not doing that, they're signaling that they're an outsider and you
Yes.
get to exclude them.
Hmm.
Like, I think fashion, like actual clothing fashion, not even, and also fashions of thought and behavior and stuff, they undermine like this long-term wisdom, and they also dissipate your energy into something totally superficial, but it's
Very
also
much.
exclusionary. Yeah,
Yes.
it's
Very superficial. Very, um, again, it's division. It's another form of the division rather than the expression of you've got your mainstream fashion, and you've got people who will take elements of mainstream fashion and remix it a little bit and they will always stand out. You'll have like for years upon years, I just go out and I just see like people in a uniform.
Yes.
It's like, are you not even going to sew a badge on that? Like, put a zip somewhere, or like, come on.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really carefully curated. But I want I have this question for you because I guess they call it dilettante. Like have little bits of knowledge. So like mismatched that I'm not sure it gets me to the right answer, but sometimes I hit on something that's right. So let me ask you what you think of this. So I think that it's possible that one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, if people say that the parable of the Good Samaritan was the most important parable,
Mhm.
that one of the most important message of Jesus, one of them is this idea of not treating people from the out group differently, like not having a double ethic. And that the Good Samaritan story was like that. And I feel like a lot of, the secret societies and cults
Mhm.
and stuff, that a lot of power comes from treating your own better than treating that out group.
Yes.
And that it takes quite a lot to love your neighbor as yourself, meaning like your neighbor, not yourself, like not
Mhm.
necessarily, your neighbor meaning something separate from you, maybe.
Indeed.
Do you think that that's as central to Christ's message as I kind of feel like it had to be?
Yeah, it's very much up there, 100%, because the environment, whether that be nature, whether that be another human being, whether that's mankind or hybrids, whatever, if you want to get down that route, they are still a reflection of the greater you.
Hmm.
So it's, we can internalize it. And of course, charity starts at home, and you've got to build your own foundations, your own sort of household once you've got that in order, of course. And in that process of you doing that, of course, thy neighbor is thy neighbor, isn't it? Why would you be horrible? Why would you not be charitable? Why would you not offer assistance where appropriate? Now, there is I guess a thin line depending on who you're dealing with, who your neighbor is, but that line is thin in reference to being too charitable, being too giving, to the point where your neighbor then sees you as, yeah, you see that guy, I can go over there and he'll give me 50 quid. He'll just give
Yes.
it me, he won't even borrow it me, kind of thing.
Yes. And that's very interesting to me too, because I read a book, which I think is like a staple, a kind of basic psychology book. I don't know. Somebody gave it to me and I read it, and it's called Boundaries. Anybody's into this kind of thing probably has read it themselves. But what was surprising about this book was that it was couched, it had a lot of scripture in it. And what it's really designed for is like someone like me who, what you're saying, like you can be kind of too charitable. And,
Mhm.
and what it is don't confuse being charitable and Christian values, whatever, with being a doormat, being taken advantage of. I think I read this also in Jordan Peterson's book, The 12 Rules of Life, where he talks about like what you, by being a doormat or a sucker for somebody who sees you coming a mile away, you are diverting resources to something that isn't healthy and good, and that these boundaries are important, and you can do it. And I think of it in the context of my kids. So I was the youngest of 9 and I overcompensated a little bit, so nobody ever did anything for me, which is fine. I don't care. I was fine for it. I was fine for it. Like I did my own laundry since as long as I can remember, even before I
Mm.
probably had my own bed. It's who cares, right? It's fine. I had a job when I was 15 and I'm fine. And I still in my mind, I just would try to make sure that they always had everything. And I like wasn't good at saying no and all of that. And when I read this book about boundaries, I was like, wow, that did not do them a service. Like I did not teach them what they needed to know to be independent and
Yeah.
self-confident. They're fine now. Like I kind of corrected course when it started to, they were adolescents and it started to look like, oh my gosh, these kids are a little bit incompetent and spoiled, but so we got on track, which is
Created
fine.
this monster.
It's a right. It's a learning process, but
Yes.
in that process, like I was reading, learning about this idea of boundaries, and it takes so much courage
Mm.
to do, because it's so easy. Like, so you think Christian is like you want to be charitable and giving, but what you realize underneath it a little bit is that there's satisfaction in that for yourself.
Yeah.
Like some of that comes right back at you. And to be the person who says, you know what? No, maybe you look like a bitch or whatever, but maybe it's the right thing to do. But you, instead of having that little added, oh, you're a nice person, it's like, oh, she's a bitch. It's like, wait a second. So this maturing process does take a part. And then again, we get back to like the discernment versus and the judgment versus the emotion. And, I don't know what you would call it as about self-image, but there's something a little bit subtle about that, about confusing like being a good person and people liking you.
Yeah. It all comes down to, if we put it in its more simplistic terms, just try and use the most basic elements. It's good people and bad people. And generally, when you're around good people, there's not much friction. There's a lot more giving. There's a lot more sort of holistic experience, versus when good people are around bad people, it's a little edgy. It's people could be taken advantage of a situation financially, spiritually, emotionally. That dynamic is unfortunately one that's going to be here until righteousness is restored on this plane of existence.
This goes right back to what you were saying in the beginning, which is like your first thought. So when you're saying, when you're around people like that and you think, am I reading this right? Is this person, taking advantage or whatever? And then your first instinct in that case is almost always right.
Yes.
It's just, I can't remember a time where you weren't like, that guy gives me a little bit of a, be careful feeling. Like I can't remember, maybe once in my life was I like, I was so wrong. I mean, I think I'm not saying I'm a great judge of character. I just think it comes across more in person.
Yes.
Than like on a Zoom thing.
Of
That's
course.
Another thing that's really important is that vibe, which we're getting neutered from it. And even to the point where the Pope was in on it, because Zooming mass is not mass. Zooming mass, telling everybody, the whole world that, oh, the idea that you can just watch mass on TV. I know you're not Catholic, but in Catholicism, the Eucharist is the body of Christ. Like you're in the presence of the Eucharist, which you're definitely not on a screen. And yet you're led to believe, because of the way the church is treating it right now, that it has that kind of like a supernatural value, which it absolutely does not.
The wonders of the spells.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's hard to unwind. And that's the thing. Like I'm on this mission to figure something out. Like I just feel very stalled and trying. Yes, we've got the Great Reset, you got the World Economic Forum, you've got like things that are happening with lockdown and Zooming. Like I can see it. We can all see it. We can all tell each other the same stories over and over again. Like, oh my gosh, like it's like when my son was born with Down syndrome. It took me like 2 years to be like, whoa, this kid has Down syndrome. Like, whoa, my kid has Down syndrome. Like, whoa. Now I'm like, okay, I get it. It's fine. Like, this is now me. This is my life. This is my world, and there has to be a deeper understanding of it. And, I can go down like the lizard path or interdimensional beings or demons or nothing, or just money. And all of that stuff is just a way for them to convince us that it's not just about money and power, sex and whatever,
well,
it might be.
Everything you've mentioned there, I think we cannot discount it. Even the potential lizard people. I mean, there is, and we don't have the time to go specifically into that realm, but there is a logical or feasible explanations for these sightings, etc., etc. I don't think it is as extreme as it's been basically made out, that there is a reptilian race. I don't think there's anything like that personally. But in regards to interdimensional shape-shifting creatures, I think there is definitely a place for that, based upon scientists, quote unquote, discovering what 12 is it dimensions and stuff. So,
and even the most mainstream Christian sect, I believe, acknowledges angels, or in any
Mm,
case, Jesus is interdimensional.
yes.
I'm just saying, like, it's part of our archetype. Anybody in like mainstream America is familiar with that as a totally um fundamental archetype, whether you be like, okay, yeah, but it's not true, but still, like, it's
Mm,
where a lot of people do believe it's true. Millions of people, hundreds of millions of people do believe that's just part of tenets of their religion. So it can't be, maybe it takes a dip. So with maybe it's easy to just accept it in that narrow framework.
hmm
And I mean, I have a hard time even accepting it, the Catholic teaching of that kind of stuff, with guardian angels. That's hard for me to get my mind around. But they say
Yeah.
it, that
Yeah.
it's a fairly mainstream idea.
hmm hmm I mean, terminology, angel, biblical, religious connotations. Fast forward to the mid 20th century, we have a phenomenon where we're talking about extraterrestrials. We're talking about aliens. Could we be indeed talking about one and the same entity, but
And
just
it
mislabeling them and putting
on
different?
purpose.
Exactly. The framework I was going down the path.
Yeah.
I think.
Which is how you get something like an antichrist.
Mhm,
Because that's what I used to ask my father. He'd always tell me, like, he was real into prophecies and Fatima, and Russia will be converted, and 1,000 years of peace and all that stuff, which I don't really know very much about. But he would say that there would be an antichrist,
mhm.
and it could be a pope. He thinks most likely it would be a pope. And I said, well, how would you know? How would you know, like, that you were following the wrong one? He's like, yeah, I don't know. And then when 9/11 happened, I remember, um, not my dad, but someone close to him saying, like, those guys, they really believe that they were, maybe they really believe that they were doing God's work. And if they really thought they were doing God's work, then how could God not let them go into heaven? And I was like, I can't accept that at
No,
all.
yeah,
So,
no,
so
yeah.
this is how then I concluded, I deduced what is probably a tenet that was somewhere lurking in my mind, that if God's going to hold you accountable for behavior, we have to be able to tell the difference between good and evil.
hmm
We have to be able to have the reason to say which thing is good and which thing is evil, to be able to
Yeah,
actually apply in the world, and have the free will to choose it. And I
exactly.
believe those are all tenets of Christianity, that
hmm
you should have all those things. So I believe there is discernment, and that's why I don't so I go real down far down the rabbit hole. I do my conspiracy stuff, and I really believe that there's people conspire at the top. Of
Oh
course,
yeah.
obviously, like
Mm,
CEOs and COOs conspire. Like, they just, that's the nature of the thing. They don't tell everybody everything. But I think that if it gets to the point where you like people say about the Constitution, it was a setup. And I believe that. I know it really should never have replaced Articles of Confederation. I get all that. But what people believe is true about it makes it true, because no contract can exist with one party misunderstanding the terms. That's a
exactly.
fundamental. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so for me, like, I feel like, okay, if someone never says anything that deviates from what you can believe to be true with your own discernment, then that person is probably not the Antichrist.
hmm
Whereas, like, and I don't think Pope Francis is the Antichrist, but Pope Francis says a lot of stuff that isn't right, that is not right. And there is another pope who wears white stuff, who's in a castle nearby,
hmm
so I'm not saying it's the Antichrist, but I'm saying I can tell, like, it's not like he's absolutely perfect. And you're like,
Yeah.
gee, but still, is he a bad guy? It's like, he's not absolutely perfect. He's definitely, you can discern that guy is saying stuff that is not right. And I think, like, as far as Antichrist or this stuff, the really evil stuff, I think you can see it as long as you keep your values intact and
Yes.
defend them.
Exactly, and be courageous in your own self to study to show thyself approved, and not allow man on a Sunday, first day of the week, to dictate to you all sorts of stuff, and not even dictate, to discern the manuscript so you can understand it as the lay, because your preacher or pastor, priest, whatever, he's gone to theologian school, he's invested, 3.5, 4 years, and he's studied all of the various sort of world religions and really went into the exegesis of the New Testaments and stuff. He or it should be, in essence, very learned and very scholared. But man has a doctrine, and as we know, there are many denominations within Christianity. Roman Catholicism being, well, I guess maybe the third or fourth, well, the third oldest in that respect. Um, and we look at the basics of it is that we've got an Old and a New Testament. Yeshua HaMashiach, as the world calls Jesus. Um, Depending on the denomination, Jesus is worshipped as the physical manifestation of the Most High on earth, as well as being the Most High himself, being a triune, the Most High, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. And there's some, obviously, as we know, there's denominations who think that's totally incorrect. The majority of them do go down this triune
I'm not familiar
basis.
with that word.
Triune.
I don't know what that means. I know what the Trinity is.
Well, it's triune, Trinity, one and the same.
Okay.
Just different verbiage. Just different verbiage.
Okay.
So it's, where is the understanding? Like, what are we actually doing? Are we just going to follow someone's interpretation? And don't get it wrong, we do need to fellowship. When two or more are gathered in my name, that is church. We do need to fellowship. We need to worship. We do need to exchange ideas. What did you think about this part of the parable? What was your interpretation of this? Because it is a personal journey, and seeking guidance from other people who are more learned or older can help you in ways. But as I say, it's a personal journey. So for me, having these labels, and I understand as children, we're brought up in a denomination. And if that denomination is working for you and it answers all the questions, and you are allowed, and it's not frowned upon you for you to read the extra biblical texts, i.e. the book of Jasher, the Apocrypha, the book of Enoch, if you're allowed to read those things and allow those extra quote unquote non-canonized text to enrich your understanding of said Old and New Testament, then that should do nothing but, as I say, enrich your experience and understanding, and ultimately your personal relationship with the Most High.
Okay, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
So I'm a very poor defender of the faith. I don't know how to do it, and I'm not really ready to do that. But I will say, I understand what you're saying about the man intervening between you and the sacred text and all that. I like Catholicism because I do feel like it has a robust intellectual and analytical history from a place that really builds on itself. And people send me stuff like the true history of the Catholic Church, and I will dig into it, absolutely will. But I feel like to the extent that it has had a thread of integrity, which usually is carried on through the people, like there have been plenty of bad popes, but I think, so let's just say the church as the people of the body of Christ maybe includes even more than the church. I'm not 100% sure, but I think if you really get into it, you're actually required always to obey your conscience. And that is absolutely true, no matter whether you agree with the church's teachings or not. And you have to exercise discernment. And there's lots and lots of stuff in the Catholic Church that I would just definitely say is not right and should be cut away. But the thing that makes me not abandon it and not even be like crazy about this idea of a schism, which may be coming because we do actually have two popes right now, is that I'm worried about basically a civil war in the US, if not even broader, and like could be a fighting war, might not, but like the things that are going on right now, and the powers that be are hinting at this and certainly trying to foment it. This thing with Roe versus Wade, which is the abortion law,
Oh,
may be overturned.
yes, indeed. That's major, that is.
and like the trans stuff and teaching kids and young kids about transgenderism and stuff it's really seems to me meant to have an explosive polarizing effect. And polarizing is like two sides. And the two sides right now are neither of them are to my liking. Like the one is this weird communist thing, which isn't really communist. Like the Democrats are, huge. It's just terrible. They're all corporatists. They're all serving the same master. But like the way the emotions are going, the one is like the left is right. And that's the people who are, I guess, getting their information from TikTok and whatever. And then there's the kind of the right, which used to be more of like the classical liberal libertarian type thing. And then Trump brought identity politics to the right. And so then you have that sense of kind of nationalism and defending yourself against this onslaught from the left and, looking for a clash. And I don't like, those are both in my observation, like ideologically corrupt. I don't like them. I don't, they tend to say, well, the power, I remember when the Tea Party was supposed to be about like taxed enough already and smaller government. And then they would start advocating for the power and promise of big government to promote business. And I'm like, what the hell? And so now I start thinking, well, what do I do? Right. As a one lone voice or as a bunch of podcasters together, we're not getting anywhere. And it may be true that we may actually need some kind of touchstone or base or organization. And I hesitate to say person, like a pope or whatever, but I look at a kind of traditional religion like Catholicism. And I think, maybe there are answers there. And, even if it's just wisdom, like my mother doesn't get too upset because she says, well, God is up in his heaven. And I don't know why you get so worked up about this stuff. I mean, don't you have faith?
So are you proposing potentially in its most basic form that in essence, and I'll utilize as you'll be discussing, the Roman Catholic Church be the ruling force outside of besides replacement, of the government?
I couldn't say that. Although I am reading this book that's blowing my mind about how this idea of Americanism was intentionally inserted into the Catholic Church by the CIA to make it seem like horrific that church and state should, that this idea of church and state being separate is like obviously the only answer. I mean, it makes me very uncomfortable to even question that. I'm such a hardcore, I was really raised on Americanism. Even my parents were so religious, were absolutely completely against the merging of church and state. Mostly, I think that their position was there are fewer Catholics in the US than Lutherans or whatever, Protestants. So if there's a merging of church and state, at best you're going to get Episcopalianism, you're going to get the Church of England, which they didn't want, you know what I mean? So for us, we always felt threatened by that kind of an idea. But we're a melting pot. What if you're Haiti or the Philippines where everybody's Catholic?
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you? And the why wouldn't you is what people think of like Sharia law, where you would actually mete out punishment on somebody for violating a moral law that wasn't a law that violated somebody's civil rights. And I could never accept that. I mean, I could never accept that because the power of corruption is too great. Absolutely could not.
Indeed.
And it's nobody's business. I mean, what conscience is conscience. It's entirely up to you to exercise your conscience. But to the extent, and I'm still not even going here, but to the extent that it's about, and I couldn't even get my mind around this, but my father used to be very anti-communist. So, and I'm going back to my throwback of my youth because these are all, I'm just grasping anywhere for a better insight, but my father's super anti-communist and he liked Joe McCarthy, who did he did the trials against anti-American people. And one of the things he used against them, and a lot of his stuff was actually true. Like it came up when they went into the KGB files, like after the Soviet Union fell, like he was telling the truth about it, like whatever. But I mean, it still doesn't really justify what he was doing. But one of the things he did was he would say, you were a member of the Communist Party and therefore you should be canceled. And for me, even growing up, I was like, so what? You're a member of the Communist Party. Can't our truth, can't our the value of liberty, the prosperity and the freedom there triumph over communism? Can you not take that threat? And my father would say, it was actually proven to be financed by the Russian government. But even then I was like, so what? You can't take that. You can how fragile is your truth, as it were. But now
to be able to withstand the propaganda. Yeah.
I know, but we're not doing it. It's not happening. We're not, because we don't control the media. Like somebody else is controlling it all. Someone else is controlling it all. And it's not just the default to freedom. It's a default to totalitarianism, which is descending upon us.
Yes.
And do you fight totalitarianism with totalitarianism? Like, I can't really say that you do. So I feel like I headed down maybe dead ends, but I find it helpful to try on really radical ideas. I've always felt that way.
Yeah.
And you just try them on. And if you're right and those ideas are wrong, you will end up figuring out that they're wrong in the end. But you can't really understand why they even exist in the first place if you don't really give them some, if you're afraid to think about them.
Entertain the idea, exhaust it, see what the plus is, what the minus is, like, oh no, that couldn't work. The only way that could work if this kind of scenario would be in place. But I'd like to, the more and more we get into the Gregorian year of 2022, and I've been thinking about this for a few years now, I think we just need, and you've eloquently given me some links, reference the Great Reset and stuff, because I hear the phraseology and I've heard some bits and pieces and I've seen a few speeches and stuff, but I'm like, what does all of it mean? It sounds good and all that. I'm thinking maybe we do need a great reset, not in respect to, and obviously this is CFR Network, and I've had no connections to.
No, it's not. Yes, their great reset is a reset to zero for a lot of people. I don't think that's what you want.
No,
okay.
I mean like a reset back to maybe like the 1900s. Like de-technologify what's going on. Like, let's just go back to like how Dr. Kendra Becker's doing her thing, homesteading. Let's give everyone 2-3 acres of land. Let's get away from what we're doing. Let's devolute in regards to technology, and let's see how enriched we can be as humanity.
Well, did you ever read Technological Slavery by Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber?
Yes, I certainly did. And that is
not the right idea. It's easy to read, but there's also someone he pulls a lot of his ideas from was Jacques Ellul, who was a Christian, like a spiritualist, anarchist, maybe even like Tolstoy. I'm not 100% sure, but he wrote the original one, which was the Technological Society, which is really hard to get through. Like, it's a really dense read, but it has